Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. The last shot of the 21 gun salute was finished. Naruto dropped the salute before looking towards the gray sky. The storm moved over Konoha a day ago and refused to drop any rain. The large marble slab only had one name on it. It was issued a day after he returned from Wave. It would bear the name of every fallen ranger to come. Naruto dismissed his team as he started to walk alongside the Hokage. Still can't believe it only happened 5 days ago, Gigi, Naruto said as he kept stride with the old man. Hiruzen nodded his head in agreement. It's always sad to see an ally fall. How are you holding up? Naruto smiled to the old Hokage. Better. He wouldn't have wanted me to be sad. Probably tell me to get my shit together while still calling sir at the end. Sarutobi laughed as he clapped Naruto on the back. Yes, he more than likely would. It seems this had drew a crowd, he said as he nodded toward the assorted group of Konoha ninja standing by the fence to see what the noise was. Naruto looked towards the group and saw more than a few familiar faces. It seemed some teams training were curious about the noise and dragged their teachers along with them. Team 2, 7, 8, 10 all stood by their teachers. They were looking in awe at the base. Kakashi had his head bowed in respect to a fallen comrade along with the other Junin senseis. Their students still barely understood what was going on before them. He opened his Ika much to the annoyance of the 6 women present. One decided to speak their mind. "Oh Kakashi, what is that?" asked a sugar-sweet voice of Kushina. Kakashi's book disappeared in a flash much to the amazement of his students who barely saw him without his book. Nothing, Kushina. Kushina nodded her head but turned back to the grave. I wonder who died. Kurenai was standing beside her friend Anko said. It was Naruto's teammate Juggernaut-san. This caused the assorted group to gasp except for a few who scoffed. One decided to speak up. Tisk the Dobi probably got him killed. Sasuke finished that sentence to be knocked to the ground from a hard smack to the head. He looked up to see one very pissed off Kakashi much to the shock of the group. Don't disrespect the dead for their sacrifice, especially on the day they are buried. Sasuke couldn't believe his teacher hit him. Standing he just muttered whatever as he wisely kept quiet after that. Kushina turned a questioning gaze to Kurenai. How did you know that, Kurenai-chan? Kurenai grew slightly red as all the attention was on her. She started, well. Flashback. Kurenai was sitting at the dango stand with Anko discussing the blonde enigma that was one Naruto. So you're saying this blonde just stepped out as the bandits were being killed and said calmly, Kurenai-san, we're your extraction team? Asked Anko as she took a bite of her dango. Kurenai nodded her head. Yeah, totally oblivious to what was happening behind him. Then when those warthogs he called them flew over, I never seen a display of firepower like that before. 1 second there is still 500 bandits, the next there is only 25 left, and then they didn't even live long enough to escape. Anko whistled. It would take a squad of Anbu to take out those numbers. Still, I wonder where the brat disappeared to, she stated as she was wanting to thank the brat for saving her friend, but he had disappeared that day. Kurenai sighed as she said, Hokage-sama said he was away on an A- rank mission when I asked him earlier. This caused Anko, who was taking a sip of her tea, to spit it out along with a few ninja who were eavesdropping on the conversation. AA rank. Why would he send him on one of those? Kurenai shrugged her shoulders. He said Naruto took it voluntary, said he was helping a client out. Anko was about to respond but stopped. Kurenai looked at her to see she was gone. Turning around she saw her pulling the person they were talking about through the door. Naruto was walking around trying to clear his head when he felt a hand grab the back of his shirt pulling him towards the dango stand he just passed. He was about to break the arm of the person dragging him when he saw it was Mitarashi Anko. He looked into the dango shop to see Kurenai blushing in embarrassment at the situation, so decided to enjoy the ride. When Anko finally made it back to Kurenai, she propped Naruto in a seat, taking a seat next to him, having both females on either side of him. There was an awkward silence that started to ensue until Naruto coughed, saying, You're looking a lot better now, Kurenai. Anko snorted as Kurenai blushed even more. Thank you again, Naruto-san. Naruto waved it away. I did what anyone else would do, and what did I tell you about using honorifics with me? He grinned at her, making Kurenai eyes widen. Anko let out a laugh before slapping the teen on the back. Wow, I have never seen Kurenai-chan blush that hard in a while, but thanks for making sure my friend got home safely, she said as she took a bite of dango. So was it true you killed 500 bandits in seconds? She asked, making Naruto cough as he took a sip of tea. Naruto shook his head, showing shock. Kurenai and Anko thought he was being modest. That was the pilots in the 810s and my team. The clean-up team counted a total of 835 bodies. Everything got quiet in the stand at that answer. Anko raised a delicate eyebrow. A10. Naruto snickered, saying, sorry, that's the model number, but their nicknames are warthogs. Anko nodded her head in understanding but asked another question, so what A-rank mission were you on? This caused Naruto to cough. How do you know that, Mitarashi-san? Kurenai finally spoke up. Hokage-sama said you were on one when I asked where you were. I was looking for you so I could thank you again. Naruto sighed as his eyes took a haunted look. We were liberating Wave Country from a corrupt businessman. Anko saw the look and couldn't resist asking, what happened, Naruto? Naruto lowered his head. My teammate Juggernaut was killed trying to gain us some more time for reinforcements to arrive, he said as he stood abruptly before nodding to the two. Thank you for your hospitality. Have a good day, Kurenai-san, Anko-san. He left the stand. When Kurenai tried to find him outside the shop to apologize, he had disappeared. Flashback end. And that was how me and Anko figured it out. She finished seeing a few odd faces among the genin. Asuma took a drag off his cigarette, so that was why they named the bridge Great Ranger Bridge EH. They turned to him questioningly. I and my team crossed it while on a mission, and the country seems to be a vibrant trading hub now, in only a few days no less. They nodded their heads and started to walk towards the Hokage as he walked out the gate with Naruto. They seemed to be chatting quietly that stopped when the assorted group drew near. Naruto waved his hand lazily. Kurenai, Anko, Kakashi, Kushina, how are you all doing on this cloudy day? The assorted responses were usual. The genins looked flabbergasted that this man was on a first-name basis with their teachers. Sasuke decided to open his mouth again. Get your teammate killed, Dobi. Kakashi slapped his hand over Sasuke's mouth at the dark look he received from the Hokage. Everyone was expecting Naruto to retaliate in some fashion, however they were surprised when Naruto smiled sadly. Yes, I did. I led my team into a situation not properly prepared. However, I wonder how you would fare against hundreds of mercenaries, he stated, walking slowly to Sasuke, who glared at the blonde. I would have been victorious, he said in a pompous tone. Oh, how so? Mercenaries are tougher than bandits, but that's right, you haven't left the village yet, Naruto said softly as he stood in front of Sasuke, who roared in anger, trying to throw a punch towards Naruto. The Junins started to move to stop him, but they were stopped from a look from the Hokage. They were surprised when Sasuke fell to the ground, seemingly being tripped. However, when he stood to turn to Naruto, he formed hand seals to only stop when he felt nothing. How powerful are you without chakra? Have you trained your body for that situation? Naruto said as he stood calmly to the side as Sasuke stared down at the seal stuck to his chest, looking at Naruto with he attempted to charge him again but was stopped as he was knocked out by Kakashi. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, for this disrespect. I'll make sure he is properly punished, Kakashi said as he hoisted the unconscious boy over his shoulder. Sarutobi nodded his head. See that it is done. The boy will be lucky to ever leave the village after that display. Kakashi flinched, knowing they were stuck doing more D-rank. Sighing, he motioned the rest of his team to follow him as he left to avoid more humiliation. Naruto sighed as he said, I still can't believe the council used their yearly veto to have the Uchiha placed on Kakashi's team. Sarutobi rubbed the bridge of his nose. Yes, I should have stopped that before it happened, but now we must wait and see how he will turn out. Naruto nodded as he turned to the group, saying, sorry you all had to see that. Hopefully Kakashi will be able to break him of that mentality. The Junins nodded while the students remained quiet, shocked Sasuke would blatantly attack an ally in front of the Hokage. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck as he turned to the Hokage. I think I'm going to end my vacation early. I'll head to Suna first, seeing as how there are allies. This caused the Junin to raise their brows. Kushina couldn't help but ask, why are you going to Suna, Naruto? Naruto turned back to her. Got a mission to deliver an invitation. Was going to wait for my week off to end, but I'm getting stir crazy. This caused a few snickers. Kushina knew that this would be a chance to get her team hopefully some better experience before the Chunin exams. Hokage-sama, would it be alright if my team tagged along for experience? Sarutobi started to deny it, but Naruto nodded his head that it was okay. I will allow it, and it would strengthen bonds with our new allies and allow the genin to see the new technology. Kurenai spoke up after that. Would it be alright if my team also came along? Asuma also nodded his head in agreement. Naruto sighed, knowing this was bound to pop up. If we took all of you, it might seem like an act of war. However, I will have more documents to deliver after this one, so you can accompany me on those, okay? Team 8 and 10 seemed downtrodden but perked up at the chance to help later. Naruto smiled at them and nodded to Kushina. Meet me at the East Gate in 30 minutes, and pack lightly, seeing as how this shouldn't take more than a day. Kushina nodded as she led her team away, followed by the other team. Naruto turned to the old Hokage as he handed him a scroll. This is for Suna. Make sure Team 2 returns safely, okay? Naruto smiled at him. Nothing should go wrong. I'm going to take some Humvees, should be back before nightfall. Sarutobi nodded as he disappeared from view. Naruto walked back into the base, radioing his team to get ready. He asked N-127 and N-128 to drive and gun the second Humvee. They nodded as they grabbed their gear before heading towards the gate. Naruto sealed 2 Humvees into scrolls as he started to walk towards the obstacle course that was set up. He watched as Haku ran through the obstacles with surprising grace. He smiled as he motioned her over. Haku was the first recruit to join. While she was also the first female ranger, she showed surprising talent at the training. What's up, Naruto-kun? She asked as she reached him. She was sweating from the workout as she took deep breaths. I'm just letting you know I'm leaving to take a document to Suna. I should be back tonight, so I don't want you slacking off while I'm away, you hear? He joked as she punched his arm. She smiled, sticking her tongue out at Naruto. I won't, but just come back safely, okay? Naruto smiled as he turned. He waved over his shoulder before saying over his shoulder, "Yeah, nay, but I want you to be ready to be on my squad in time for the Chunin exams." Haku waved goodbye before returning to the course. She was glad Naruto decided to let her join, but he had told her she had need to get permission from Zabuza first. It was surprisingly easy as his attitude towards her did a complete 180 when they arrived. He said that if this was her choice, he was glad she was going to learn to defend herself better, but he also told her if she ever got the chance to shoot Naruto in H's for him. While she disregarded that last one, Zabuza seemed deadly serious about it. She was surprised as the cells allowed a comfy living despite the situation. Zabuza was happy to have 3 square meals a day. She moved into a vacant apartment in Naruto's building that was being paid for her by the Rangers until she started to get pay when she completed boot camp. She sighed as her and the rest of the clones who were constantly training took off in a run. The last thought on her mind was hoping her Naruto-kun would return safely. Naruto was busy talking to the gate guards, a couple Chunin who had a few questions about the Rangers. Kushina and her team arrived at the designated time. Naruto said his goodbyes to the Chunins as he made his way to Kushina. Seeing as how you're the one with the mission, you're in command, Naruto, Kushina said as she finally reached him. Naruto nodded his head as he looked at her students. Mikazuki was the team's ninjutsu specialist. She had light brown hair pulled into a high ponytail. She wore a simple battle dress like Tenten from Team 9. The next was Bara as she practiced taijutsu to be like her idol Senju Tsunade. She had strawberry blonde hair cut short. She wore a fishnet shirt covered by a green vest along with loose pants. The finally one was Kosame, who was learning to become a med nin. She was the most conservative, wearing baggy pants along with a hoodie. Naruto hadn't seen her without the hood up, but black bangs covered her left eye. The one thing they all had in common was they were Kushina's adopted daughters. Naruto saw they had packed lightly. He pulled the two scrolls. He tossed them away as he said, "Your team will be riding in the second Humvee with N127 and 128, you will be riding with my team in the first one." Two plumes of smoke later the Humvees appeared, the Rangers started to get into their designated vehicles. Naruto heard Bara let out a squeal, "I can't believe I get to ride in one of these." Naruto laughed as he helped the Genins into the Humvee showing them how to buckle in. Kosame managed to get the front passenger while both Bara and Mikazuki were stuck in the back. Naruto took a back seat with Kushina in the first Humvee. Naruto nodded to Scar who started to drive towards Suna. Kushina seemed tense at first but started to relax as they drove on. She turned to Naruto however halfway there, "Naruto, I really have been meaning to say something." She seemed nervous and Naruto felt a rock settle in his stomach as he nodded to Kushina to continue. "I have always regretted doing what I did to you. I was so distraught over what had happened that it blinded me to my real self. I should have never." She was stopped feeling a finger against her lips. She looked shocked at Naruto as he spoke. "I understand, Kushina. While what you did was wrong, it is done. You may never be my mother or I your son, but I hope at least we can be friends." Kushina let tears fall as she gripped Naruto in a hug as she cried into the crook of her neck saying thank you over and over again. Naruto patted her back softly. "You're a great woman, Kushina, and a good mother if your team is by anything to tell. I'm just glad we can be friends." He was however shocked when he felt a tongue start to lick his neck. A blush started to form. Kushina then sat back with a matching blush. She couldn't look at Naruto as she couldn't believe what she just done. She didn't know why but it just felt right for the moment. However, she was surprised when a hand grasped hers giving it a squeeze. She saw it was Naruto. She smiled timidly as she asked, "When we get back would you like to get something eat sometime?" Naruto was shocked by her forwardness but nodded his head as he let her hand go. Everything went uneventful as they passed from trees into the desert sand that made up most of Wind Country. Naruto was chatting with Kushina, getting to know her a little better when Scar said, "We are being followed, boss." Naruto and Kushina both turned serious as Naruto asked, "Have you seen them?" Scar nodded his head as he tilted it to the right side. Naruto causally glanced out the side. What surprised him was that it was a team carrying a large gourd on their back. Whoever it was had blood-red hair. Naruto caught the flash of a headband. He took off his Akage sight to get a better look and saw it was the hourglass symbol, meaning it was a Suna ninja. "Just a lookout, I guess. Doesn't have the scratch though, so I wouldn't suspect a missing nin," Naruto said as he reattached the sight to his gun. They passed the same person multiple times, confusing Naruto as to how they were moving so fast. However, the walls of Sunagakure soon appeared before them. There were ninjas lining the wall while 4 people stood on the ground. Scar parked the vehicle in front of the 4 as Naruto jumped out along with Kushina. Her team stayed in the Humvee waiting to see what would happen. Naruto walked towards the Junin who had a cowl covering the side of his face. He noticed that the other 3 must be his team. There was a female with her hair done up in 4 ponytails. She had a fan attached to her back. The next was a boy that looked the same age as the girl, wore a black jumpsuit. He had war paint on his face and seemed to be a puppeteer as he seemed to carry a body on his back. The last one though was the one who seemed to be following them. The who turned out to be a female with short cropped hair. Naruto could have mistaken her for a boy if it wasn't for the shape of her face, and she had a kanji tattoo for love on the left side of her forehead. "State your business here. You carry the Konoha emblem, but I can say I have never seen you or your machines before," the man said seriously as he grew tense. Naruto pulled out a scroll. "I'm Naruto, commander of the Konoha Rangers. I am here to deliver the invitation to the Chunin exams, and I was sent by the daimyo and Hokage." Baki seemed to relax slightly but was still tense. "I will lead you to the cage, and however your machines must stay outside of the village." Naruto nodded his head, turned to Kushina. "I'll have my rangers wait with the Humvees. Do you want to bring your team?" Kushina nodded her head as she moved to tell them. Naruto walked over to let Joker know of the plan. "It looks like the Humvees have to stay outside. I want you guys to stay with them, okay?" Joker nodded his head from on top of the Humvee. Naruto turned but was stopped by Scar. Be careful, boss, something doesn't feel right. Naruto nodded his head as he was rejoined by Team 2 as they followed Junin and his students. As they walked through the large wall, Naruto learned that Junin was Baki, and his teammates were siblings named Temari, Kankuro, and Gaia. Gaia was surprised as her mother had quieted when she saw the machines driving through the desert. She was more surprised, however, when she felt her mother grew fearful at the sight of the blonde and redhead. She had learned they were named Naruto and Uzumaki Kushina. As they reached the round administration building, the girls of Team 2 were awed at being able to see another of the great ninja villages. Passing through the doors, they headed up a couple flight of stairs before arriving at a pair of double doors. Baki knocked twice before being allowed to enter, followed by Naruto and Team 2. The Cage looked up from his work to see a teen in weird clothing with the Konoha emblem stitched on his armor. He sat back as he said, "So who might you be?" Naruto stood at attention saying, "I am Naruto, commander of the Konoha Rangers Cage-sama. With me is Kushina and her team, Mikazuki, Bara, and Kosame." The Cage seemed slightly satisfied with the answer but asked another question, "And who might these rangers be?" Naruto relaxed a bit, said, "We are new allies under the command of Sarutobi Hiruzen. We are the shield of the fire country." The Cage seemed to grow serious. His luck was getting worse. First Orochimaru showed up a week ago, but now these new arrivals. If what he learned from the messenger about their arrival was anything to go by, these so-called rangers had advanced technology. Then he feared that Konoha was growing too strong. What made him furious was he had learned nothing of this from his so-called allies. Cage dipped his head. "And what is your business here, Naruto-san?" Naruto pulled out a scroll before handing it to the Cage, who broke the seal. Reading it, he nodded his head before looking back towards Naruto. "Very well. Let Hokage Dono know I will arrive with a guest on the third exam. Temari, take your siblings with you and escort Naruto-san and Team 2 to the gates." Naruto nodded his head to the Cage as he turned, following the San siblings. Once they had left, Cage turned to Baki saying, "Send a messenger to Orochimaru after the Konoha scum leave. Tell him I agree to the offering." Baki nodded his head while his inside turned to stone, fearing what the Cage just agreed to. Naruto followed behind the three siblings, watching the fearful gazes turn to Gaia. It didn't take a rocket scientist to connect the stairs and the black rings around the girl's eyes. Gaia seemed to be the host of the Aikibi if reports were to be correct. However, things stayed quiet between the groups as Team 2 took in the sights. Just as they were about to exit the walls, Gaia stopped abruptly. Turning to Naruto, she said, "Why does mother fear you and the woman?" Naruto looked confused at her before realizing that whoever sealed the demon had to messed up the seal. He grew serious as he said, "I don't know why she does, but how is the Aikibi bothering you?" This caused everyone to gasp. Team 2, because they didn't know Gaia was a Jinchuriki of the Aikibi, and the San siblings because Naruto figured it out. Gaia was shocked that when she tried to force her stand to wrap around him, it diverged away from him as if afraid of being poisoned. "Who are you really?" she asked fearfully. Naruto sighed as he looked to Kushina, asking silently for permission, to which she nodded her head. "We are Naruto and Kushina, former hosts of Kyuubi no Yoko." This caused the San siblings to back away fearfully. No one survived a Biju extraction. If they somehow survived the release of Kyuubi, then they had to be immensely powerful. Naruto sighed, knowing he scared them enough. Motioning for his group to follow him, he passed the three without a second glance. Arriving back at the Humvees, they got into their respectful positions again. They pulled away from the walls soon, again driving back towards Fire Country. Time seemed to drift by slowly as they exited the desert and began passing through River Country. As the trees started to appear more often, the sun was starting to set as they entered Fire Country borders. Naruto was idly playing with Kushina's hand as she laid her head on Naruto's shoulder. The moment was surprisingly intimate for them both. However, when Kushina's hand started to move Naruto's, it changed quickly. Fluff scene. Kushina bit her lip as she put Naruto's hand on her thigh. Naruto blushed scarlet as she moved his hand up and down her thigh. However, after each pass she inched it up farther until his hand was brushing up against her. Naruto could feel the warmth radiating from it but was shocked when she moved his hand over it. Naruto looked down questioningly at her. She gave a slight nod as she hid her face in the crook of his neck as his hand started to rub against her quickly wetting hole. Naruto felt her start to lick his neck before kissing and ing on it, attempting to give him a hickey. Naruto returned the favor by speeding up his ministrations, making Kushina bite down softly on his neck to keep her from moaning out loud. It seemed that it wasn't enough for Kushina when she grabbed his hand before sliding it into her shirt before moving it into her pants. Naruto felt a small patch of hair, but the otherwise shaven was dripping her arousal as he rubbed his fingers up and down her slit before sliding a finger into her. Kushina felt the digit enter and went rigid as it curled inside her, making her bite harder onto Naruto. Another digit soon joined the first as her hand found the bulge on his pants, rubbing it through the fabric. Naruto sped up his actions, but Kushina seemed to not take it anymore. Before acting like she nodded off, she fell into his lap. She made quick work of the buttons as Naruto's fingers were bringing her to the edge. She was, however, not ready for the hard 8-inch to spring out and smack against her face. The sight and thought of her doing that to Naruto made her even more aroused as her hand gripped the as she started to jerk him off. Naruto slid another finger into her tight hole as he watched Kushina look fascinated at his rod. He, however, wasn't expecting to feel a tongue lick the tip before taking the head in. Kushina could feel her release coming soon as she ed on the head. She gasped, feeling his thumb start to rub her, making her take him farther into her mouth, letting out a muffled groan as her vision went white for a second. Kushina was bobbing her head, trying to get Naruto to release his seed into her awaiting mouth. Naruto, not wanting to be outdone, lightly pinched her. This had the effect he wanted as Kushina moaned as her release finally came crashing down, soaking her thong along with some of her pants. But as she moaned, she forgot she was going down, accidentally taking Naruto all the way into her mouth and a little down her throat. Naruto gave a soft grunt as he emptied his seed down Kushina's throat. Kushina was shocked at the amount going down her throat. Pulling back, some splashed into her mouth, letting her taste his seed. It was bittersweet and she found she liked the taste as she swallowed another mouthful before cleaning his off. She put it back in his pants before rebuttoning them. She still felt a single digit moving in and out of her. She pulled his hand out to resist the urge to just straddle him then and there. She was shocked when Naruto licked his fingers clean, smiling at Kushina. End fluff scene. Kushina rubbed her eyes as if she just awoke. Sorry for falling asleep on you, Naruto-kun. Naruto played along. It's okay, Kushina. Hope you had a pleasurable nap. Kushina blushed red as she nodded her head. Scar didn't seem to be paying any attention to them as he kept on driving. They soon arrived at the village gates, pulling to a stop. However, before Kushina got out, she performed a quick henge to hide her soaked pants. Naruto got out and stretched. He turned to Kushina. I'll let the Hokage know we returned. I hope this was a good experience for your team. Kushina saw her team look tired from sitting so long. Yes, it should be. It showed them how documents should be handled. I'll see you around, Naruto-kun, she said as she motioned for her team to follow her as she threw Naruto a grin as she left. Naruto sighed as he turned to his team. 127 and 128, get back to the base and rest up. We will more than likely be leaving early tomorrow. Receiving affirmatives as his team sealed the Humvees before disappearing to the base for rest, he shushined to the front of the fire tower before walking in and up to his Gigi's office. He walked into the office. The Hokage saw he was grinning. He gave a smile as he said, I see the mission was successful. Naruto nodded as he said, it was a cakewalk, and Team 2 got to experience a different village while learning how to handle important documents. Sarutobi nodded as he said, well, which one would you like to deliver next? I am sure the others won't be so easy. Naruto looked serious as he said, I agree with you there. I guess I am going to head to Iowa tomorrow morning. It'll take Team 8, seeing as how it would be a bad idea to take them to Kumo. Hiruzen lit his pipe as he exhaled a puff of smoke. I agree with you there. It would cause an uproar from the Hyuga. I will send a messenger to Team 8 after you leave to notify them when to meet you. When will you be leaving? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. It would be best to leave early in the morning. It will take at least a day to even travel. Sarutobi nodded his head in agreement, but before he could speak there was a knock at the door as a Chunin popped his head in. Hokage-sama, sorry for the interruption, but the messenger hawk sent to AIM hasn't returned as expected. I fear the bird was compromised. Hiruzen sighed. Thank you, Izumo. Don't send any more messengers, he said as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. Izumo nodded as he shut the door again. Naruto, I hate to ask this, but could you personally deliver the letter to AIM for me? I fear something is amiss with Hanzo. Team 8 can wait till you go to Iowa. Naruto nodded his head. I'll head out in the morning. I'll take some extra backup to be careful. Not too much but enough in case we run into the cause of the hawk going missing. Naruto awoke early the next morning to a ringing alarm clock. He started to get dressed for the day, thinking of how he should handle the trip to AIM. While the country was neutral during the last war, there were reports of AIM ninjas attacking both Iowa and Konoha ninjas during the war. He sighed as he stepped out his balcony, inhaling the crisp morning air before shushing to the base. He saw his team checking their gear along with 2 other squads. He walked towards them. They turned to him, saluting him as he approached. He sighed, you guys already know the plan. Take 2 attack Humvees and a messenger with us, and I want you guys to keep your eyes peeled for anything that even looks remotely dangerous, okay? He received nods as they went to get the vehicles. He clicked his radio. In a couple hours launch Kyuubi for air support, understood. He looked up to the tower as a voice came out of his radio. Understood, sir. Kyuubi will launch in 3 hours to perform air support. I'm recalling the choppers in case of an emergency extraction. Naruto gave the thumbs up to the leader of the air group. Good, I hope we won't need the air support though. Naruto watched the teams showed back up. He nodded his head to them before they mass shushined to the east gate. They arrived at the gate much to the shock of the ninja guards seeing the teams decked out for combat. The Humvees were unsealed as the teams started to load up. Naruto and his team loaded onto the messenger truck. Naruto sat in the passenger as Scar followed behind the Humvee in front of them. As they started to near rain country, it started to rain before it began to pour down harder as they neared the border. Reaching the border, Naruto had them stop, seeing as how AIM closed their borders a few years ago, flaring his chakra to gain the attention of the border guards. Naruto waited for a few minutes until a voice crackled over his radio. Naruto, have you reached AIM yet? Naruto was surprised to hear the voice of Sarutobi clicking his radio. He said loudly over the rain, not yet, Gigi. We just stopped at the border to notify the border guards why we were here. So far no one has showed. The radio was quiet for a minute before Sarutobi said, something isn't right. While we have sent messengers before they were turned away, continue on and see if you can find out anything. Naruto sighed as he stepped back into the Humvee, giving the signal to continue on. They passed into the AIM border, surprisingly not being stopped. They continued driving as the rain still poured down. Scar turned to Naruto. Something doesn't feel right, boss. Where were the guards? Naruto rubbed his temples, contemplating this development. I don't know, Scar, and hopefully we will learn some answers when we get to AIM. Joker, who was sitting in back, said, that's if we don't get flooded out by this rain first. This caused Scar and Naruto to chuckle. Naruto nodded his head in agreement. I'm surprised this country isn't a sea by all the water that go. However, he was interrupted as the Humvee in front erupted into a ball of flames. Scar brought the Humvee to a dead stop as kunai pepper both sides of the Humvee, cracking the windows and a few logging into the windows. Ambush. Take defensive positions. Naruto yelled over the radio as he and his rangers hopped out to see AIM ninjas start to appear out the trees, throwing kunais and shurikens. Konoha Ranger Base. Sarutobi was sitting in the headquarters on the ranger base to oversee the mission. He felt his stomach start to sink when Naruto talked to him. However, his blood ran cold 30 minutes later when he heard Naruto's yell over the radio, ambush. Take defensive positions. He clicked the radio as a few rangers around him scurried to launch the choppers. Naruto, what's going on? There was silence for a minute before the radio crackled to life as gunfire was heard in the background. AIM ninjas ambushed us halfway to AIM, and were returning fire, but they're still coming, watch out. He heard Naruto yelled as the radio went dead again. 30 miles west of Omegakure. Naruto was laying down fire into the trees as ninja attempted to get around the fire. More than a few already lay dead around Naruto as kunai and shuriken laid broken or dented around them as shell casings started to gather. He was busy informing Sarutobi about the situation, however he was able to catch sight of a Junin performing hand seals. Before he could kill him, the man he called out, Doryuden. Naruto saw the mud dragon head form out of the ground before launching a mud ball towards the Humvee he was near. He stopped his conversation with Sarutobi, "Watch out." He yelled as he dove out of the path. The ball slammed into the side of the jeep, knocking it end of end before it slammed against a tree on the side of the road. Naruto pulled himself out of the mud before putting a bullet into the grinning Mon's head as he checked on his team. They were alright, still laying down fire. Naruto stood before he started to back up. He yelled over the fire, "Grenade the trees." The Rangers nodded in understanding as they primed grenades before throwing them into the trees. They were rewarded with the screams of pain as the grenades detonated, launching a few unlucky ninjas into the air. Naruto motioned for his team to regroup around the last Humvee. He clicked his radio, "Where is the Kyuubi?" There was static for a few minutes as Naruto feared he damaged his radio until a voice came through. "This is Kyuubi on station and awaiting fire command. Sir, activate your strobes and we will start to paint the target." Naruto sighed in relief as he yelled to the clones, "Strobes now." They nodded, but as Naruto was about to regroup them, he saw something that made him freeze. One of the Rangers who were in the first Humvee was laying on the ground screaming as he grasped his leg he was missing. Naruto cursed as he started to run towards the down teen. Halfway there, AIM ninja jumped down from a tree and activated something Naruto never thought he would see. It was a Raijin. The man who had to be Aoi swung the blade lightly across the down man, making him scream as electricity went through him. Naruto raised his gun to fire. However, when he pulled the trigger, the gun jammed from the mud it collected. Cursing aloud, he swung it behind him as he pulled a pistol. Aoi must have heard him as he looked up at Naruto before his eyes widened before 4 shots riddled his chest, knocking him to the ground. He reached the downed soldier who he saw was N065. He pocketed the Raijin before he pulled the wounded man over his shoulder. He clicked on his strobe as he started to run back towards the group. He made it halfway there before a kunai pierced his back left thigh, making him stumble. Pulling it out, he tossed it before making his way back to the group. He heard a massive explosion as some trees near him were blown apart, along with the 10 ninjas who died in the resulting fireball from the 120mm cannon from the Kyuubi. Naruto turned his head to see if anyone was following him, but what he saw was a kunai with an explosive tag attached to it landed 5 feet behind him before it exploded, launching him and 65 through the air, landed 10 feet away from the group. Naruto stood. He grabbed the hand of the downed ranger before pulling him towards the group. He felt something pierce his back twice, making him fall forward. He rolled over, feeling whatever was in his back dig a little deeper. Gasping, he sat forward, trying to ignore the pain as he started to fire his pistol to a couple chunin who thought they could get him while he was down. He felt whatever was in his back be pulled out. As he turned, he saw it was Scar as he started to drag Naruto towards the Humvee. Naruto turned back to point towards the wounded teen but saw nothing there. His heart clenched, realizing he had to be dead. Scar managed to get Naruto back to the jeep before returning fire again. Naruto saw a barrage of kunai headed towards Scar. Naruto grabbed his jacket, pulling him down as the kunai passed over him, however one slashed across his left cheek. Scar nodded his head in thanks to Naruto as he crouched, firing again. The Kyuubi stopped firing as a Blackhawk flew overhead, spraying the trees with its Gatling guns. Naruto started to get pulled away from the Humvee by Scar. He turned his head, seeing it a Chinook touched down as more Rangers jumped out to give covering fire. Naruto coughed up some blood as he put his fingers into a ram seal, activating the recall seals on the scattered weapons and Humvees. They disappeared into a puff of smoke, much to the shock of the attacking ninja who started to retreat, seeing the cause of the attack vanish. Naruto's last sight was the ceiling of the Chinook as he passed out from blood loss. Scar flipped him over, seeing the back of his vest covered in blood, pooling on the metal of the Chinook. He cursed as he scanned the wound, however he found out the wound was something beyond his caliber. he pulled out some bandages before wrapping the wounds. Scar rolled Naruto back onto a stretcher that was laid down by some rangers. He clicked his radio, "This is Field Medic Scar, and have the docs ready for a severely injured commander." There was static on the radio until the Hokage's voice came over the radio, "Doctors are waiting for your return, how bad is Naruto?" Scar bit his lip as he looked down at Naruto. "He's banged up pretty bad, but I'm sure he will make it." There was silence over the radio until, "Understood." Scar sat down near Naruto as he looked at the other 4 people to make it. Squad 3 lost their gunner at the start. Joker was silent as he looked at the pale face of Naruto. Scar leaned his head back trying to figure out why they attacked. Sarutobi stood outside the hospital. He was watching the sky for a sign of the Chinook, and he was surprised when an out-of-breath Haku appeared next to him. "Hokage-sama, is it true Naruto was injured?" she asked him fearfully. Sarutobi nodded sadly. He was ambushed 30 miles west of Omegakure, and it seems the culprits were AIM ninja. Haku looked fearfully towards the sky as she asked, "How bad is he?" Sarutobi pulled out his pipe before lighting it. "Scar told me he should make it." Haku seemed to let out a sigh of relief. "Naruto has friends in the village, shouldn't they be contacted about what happened?" Sarutobi shook his head negatively. "No, we should wait until Naruto can receive visitors before worrying them." Haku nodded her head in understanding as the sound of chopper blades start to grow louder. The Chinook appeared over the cliff as doctors rolling a stretcher ran outside. The Chinook landed on the ground as Scar and Joker quickly ran out carrying the stretcher with Naruto on it. Switching him to the roller, the medics quickly wheeled him inside past Sarutobi and Haku, who got a good look at him. He was pale as his left cheek was covered in blood from an open gash. His hair was slightly reddened in a few places, however he had blood coating the left jacket arm and seemed to have splattered across the front of his combat vest. However, as he was passing, Naruto seemed to be awake as he looked blankly around before catching sight of the Hokage. He whispered softly, "Wait, right pants pocket, give it to the Hokage." One of the medics nodded as he dug out the Raijin as Naruto was wheeled into the hospital. N245 looked at the object in his hand before running over to the Hokage. "Naruto wanted to give you this, sorry but I must go." The medic ran into the building, leaving a shocked Sarutobi who thought he would never see the object he was holding as he whispered hoarsely, "Raijin." Haku looked curious at the object in his hand. "What's the Raijin?" Sarutobi activated the muddy handle as a blade of electricity appeared. "The Raijin was the weapon of my sensei Senju Tobirama, and 9 years ago it was stolen by a deserter named Rokusho Aoi." Sarutobi deactivated the blade as he said, "Naruto must have somehow recovered it during the ambush. Konoha will forever be thankful for returning it." Sarutobi sighed. "Shall we go wait on Naruto, Haku-san?" Haku shook her head. "I am going to get back to training. It would be what Naruto wants. He wants me to take a place on his team before the Chunin exams." Sarutobi nodded his head as he waved goodbye to Haku as he went inside the building on Naruto. Next day, Naruto awoke to a steady beeping noise. He cracked open his eyes seeing it was the white ceiling of the hospital. Groaning, he attempted to sit up to only be pushed back by a hand. Turning to the side, he saw it Hiruzen. "How are you, Gigi?" Naruto asked as he realized how sore he was. Sarutobi chuckled as he sat back into his chair. "I should be asking that of you, Naruto." Naruto grimaced. "Like I got stabbed." Sarutobi nodded his head as he said, "You had a punctured kidney and a cut right lung that surprisingly didn't collapse. Along with the gash across your cheek and another wound on your left thigh, you made a complete recovery but will need a week of bed rest. Doctors and Hokage's order." Naruto frowned at that. He lowered his head. "How many died this time, Gigi?" Sarutobi face saddened as he relayed the news. 5. Squad 1 was lost along with Squad 3's gunner. Naruto gripped his bed sheets. "I had 65 in my arms, just a few feet farther and he could have made it." Sarutobi grew serious. "Any AIM ninja to arrive for the Chunin exams are going to be turned away, and it seems Hanzo turned hostile finally, but I need to know what happened and how you recovered the Raijin." Naruto looked at the ceiling as he started. Everything was okay until approximately 30 miles from AIM, the first Humvee drove over an explosive tag. Naruto relayed everything that had happened until he passed out. At the end, Sarutobi was furious at the blatant attack. Then Naruto asked, "Have they been buried yet, Gigi?" Sarutobi nodded sadly. "I watched over the funerals. They have been laid to rest by Juggernaut and their names added to the stone." Naruto nodded his head as he laid his head back. "Thanks, Gigi, for being there. I'm going to get some more sleep." Hiruzen smiled sadly at Naruto as he left the room to allow the blonde to get some sleep and to notify his friends of what happened. Kushina was sitting at home with her daughters when a knock at her door interrupted their lunch. Kushina rose from her chair to see who it was. However, she was surprised to find it was a MP handed her a scroll saying, "Uzumaki-san, Hokage-sama wanted me to deliver this." He disappeared soon afterwards. Kushina shut the door before taking a seat back at the table. She opened the scroll as her daughters looked on, wondering what was in the scroll. However, after a minute, Kushina gasped as she finished the scroll. "What's wrong, Ka-san? What's in the scroll?" asked a bewildered Bara. Kushina rolled up the scroll before saying, "Naruto-kun was injured yesterday during an ambush by AIM ninja." She finished quietly, shocking the three. "How bad is he?" asked Mikazuki. Kushina smiled. "He is going to make a recovery, and we're going to visit him later, okay?" She received nods from her kids. She was still worried about why Naruto was attacked. However, others across the city were receiving the same message from the Hokage. Kurenai and Anko received theirs at the same time, seeing as how they were at the dango stand. Kakashi received his as he was watching his students practice tree climbing. He called off training before disappearing to the base's gate. Ichiraku and his daughter Ayame got the message. They couldn't visit until later when they closed. Naruto slept soundly for a few hours before he awoke again, feeling a familiar presence. "Kakashi, I didn't know you liked watching guys sleep." He heard a chuckle from his left. He opened as he saw Kakashi with his Ika out, letting out a sigh. "I should have known. How have you been, Kakashi?" Kakashi closed his book, giving an eye smile to Naruto. "I have been good considering my team, and how are you feeling, Naruto?" Naruto sat up slightly, feeling a dull throb from his back. "Feeling a lot better now actually. So are you visiting?" Kakashi nodded his head. "Yeah, called training off to come here. You seem to be doing okay for someone to survive a ninja ambush." Naruto's face grew grim. "I was one of the lucky ones." Sighing, he grinned slightly at Kakashi. "So any news?" Kakashi leaned back in his seat. "Well, earlier today the Junin senseis entered their teams into the Chunin exams, and all the rookies are in this year, surprisingly." Naruto's jaw dropped. "All the rookies are? You sure your team can make it?" Kakashi shrugged his shoulders. "They haven't been outside the village, so I have been training them roughly for the past week, but the council wants the Uchiha to be in this one, seeing as how many daimyos want to see the last Uchiha in it." Naruto shook his head at the stupidity of the council for probably sending the Uchiha to his death. His thoughts were interrupted, however, when Kakashi stood. "I best be leaving, Naruto. Get well and I'll see you soon." He disappeared through the open window as Kurenai and Anko entered the room. Naruto spoke with them both and told them about what happened. Both seemed amazed that he survived, but then it descended into pointless chatter about the Chunin exams and how the two were doing. After an hour they both left. As Naruto is getting ready to get some more rest, his door opened again to allow Team 2 in. The same conversation pretty much happened except for the Chunin exam talk, seeing as how her students were entered for this year's one. But before they left, Kushina asked for a couple minutes alone with Naruto. It turned out she wanted to give him thanks for returning back alive. That ended with him shooting his seed down her throat, followed by promises of something more if he managed to stay alive until the Chunin exams. Naruto stayed in the hospital for another 4 days before he left. He was told to take it easy. He spent a day getting used to moving before he gathered a couple squad of rangers, telling them what he wanted. He watched as they went to go get what was needed. Naruto shushined to the fire tower before entering it, heading towards the Hokage's office. He entered, shocking Sarutobi. "Naruto, shouldn't you still be in bed?" Naruto grinned. "Always hated hospitals, but I'm here to get the invitation of Iwa." Sarutobi sighed as he rubbed his temples before throwing the said scroll to Naruto. Iwa has always proven hostile. They have held a grudge since Minato killed 300 of their troops. I fear they may mistake you for him. Naruto nodded seriously. Since he lost his whiskers, he looked like a mini Yondaime. He cut his hair short, making the resemblance a lot less. Thankfully, I understand. This time I'm taking extra precaution. I'm taking a Humvee with the Bradley. I'm taking squad 6, 8, and 9 for backup. Warthogs will be on station in case the need of a quick getaway is necessary. Sarutobi nodded his head in agreement to taking the extra backup. Sighing, he said, "I'll send a runner to Kuranai to let her know to meet you at the east gate." Naruto saluted the Hokage before thanking him and leaving to the gate to get ready along with the squads. He arrived at the gate to already see both vehicles unsealed and getting checked out before the mission. The Bradley was gathering a group of watchers seeing the new machine for the first time. Naruto walked towards the squad saying, "Squad 6 will take point in the Humvee. Squad 8 will ride in the hold with my team, and Team 8. Squad 9 will be on top of the Bradley to keep a lookout for any traps." Understood. He received a salute from the troops as Team 8 arrived. "Kuranai, your team ready?" She nodded her head as she walked towards Naruto. "Yes, they're prepared." Naruto nodded his head before saying to them, "We're going to be going into hostile territory. If you want to back out now, you can." The team stayed there, making Naruto nod in approval. "Okay, we're going to riding in the Bradley, the large vehicle behind me. Enter the back hatch and take a seat and buckle up like in the Humvee." They did as they were told as they were followed by Naruto and Squad 8. The hatch started to rise before it shut as the only light inside was a red bulb. The light tank took off following the Humvee, which was traveling slower to allow the Bradley to keep pace. A couple hours later, he heard the driver tell him, "We're nearing the village, sir. It looks like we got ninjas waiting along with the Tsuchikage." Naruto nodded his head as the rangers tensed while Team 8 looked severely nervous. The earth started to shake before it stopped as the Bradley came to a stop, dropping its ramp, allowing Naruto to come out followed by Team 8. Naruto blinked his eyes rapidly to get adjusted to the sun. He turned to see a massive rock wall had risen, blocking passage as ninjas were on top of it, tense, prepared for battle. He saw the old Sandame Tsuchikage standing watching him. "State your business here. This could be seen as an act of war with how many troops you bring," said the old man loudly from his position. Naruto said loudly, "I bring the Chunin exam invitation. I don't wish war, this is merely protection." The old man seemed to think for a minute before jumping down on the ground. He seemed to curse up a storm about his back as he motioned Naruto to come closer. Naruto led Team 8 with him as he walked towards the old man. When he was 10 feet away, he stopped. "So who are you, brat? I have never seen these things before in my long life. You speak of not wanting war, but why do you bring so many troops for a simple delivery mission?" asked the Tsuchikage as his ninjas watched the group's every movement in case a sign of an attack appeared. Naruto pulled out a scroll before tossing it to the Tsuchikage as he spoke. "I'm Naruto, commander of the Konoha Rangers. We're new allies under the command of Sarutobi Hiruzen, and I learned that even a seemingly neutral country can be hostile." He traced his still raw red scar along his cheek. The Tsuchikage read the scroll before seeing the scar. He asked, "And which neutral country would that be, boy?" Naruto sighed as he said, "Rain country." The old man's eyes widened before he let out a deep laugh. "So that was you. Ha ha, we wondered who was responsible for the death of 75 Junins and 55 Chunins." Team's 8 jaws dropped at the news as Naruto rubbed the back of neck. "I never learned of how many had attacked us, and we were ambushed while attempting to deliver an invitation to Hanzo." The Tsuchikage hummed a few minutes, seemingly thinking, until he spoke. "Yes, tell Hiruzen that I will be sending some genins and to expect me on the third exam." Naruto nodded his head before he motioned Team 8 to get back in the Bradley. "Have a good day, Tsuchikage-sama, but I must ask, do you have a Junin behind the rocks 30 meters to our left?" The Tsuchikage looked irritated at such a question. "I may be getting old, but I know where my ninjas are." Naruto nodded his head as he clicked his radio. "Take out M out Fox." The Tsuchikage was about to ask what he meant, however, a man jumped over the rock screaming, "Die Konoha scum!" All eyes turned to the man, but before he even got 5 feet from the rock, his head exploded into a gory mess. The body fell to a slump as a scratched Iwa headband clattered to the ground covered in blood. The Tsuchikage was shocked seeing the missing nin die. He turned back to Naruto. "How did you do that?" Naruto grinned as he pointed a mountain ranger a kilometer away. "Fox team just used a .50 caliber sniper rifle able to reach targets at least a kilometer away, and they are providing cover in case this meeting took a wrong turn, sir." The Tsuchikage squinted his eyes toward the mountains, not even seeing someone. He feared what would happen if they stay in his country. Naruto seemed read his mind. "They are going to be pulling out once we leave the country. They have strict orders to not fire on any Iowa ninja unless attacked. They mostly take out bandits and missing nin." That seemed to relieve some the Tsuchikage's worries. Naruto nodded his head to him before heading back to the Bradley. As they vehicles turned and left, Kuratsuchi jumped down beside the Tsuchikage. "Is this wise Unoki-sama? He was hit with a cane from the old man." "It might not be, but they have changed in Konoha and I would like to see for myself of these changes. Send a message to the daimyo about this development, and send a messenger hawk to Konoha requesting this Naruto be in the exams." Naruto was standing at the edge of the Black Hawk looking out the open side door as they flew over the sea towards Kumo. While they could have drove, they would have to pass through Hot Springs country, which was hostile ever since the end of the Third Great Ninja War. So to avoid the country altogether, they over the sea to reach Kumo. Naruto felt someone step beside him. He turned and saw it was Sarutobi Asuma. "I never thought these things would fly. Kind of different seeing the ground from so high up," he said as he took a drag of his cigarette. Naruto grinned as Team 10 was the first Konoha ninja to fly in one of the choppers apart from the Hokage. "Yes, it does change the perception of how small the nations actually are. How is your team holding up?" Asuma looked back to his team. Shikamaru was sitting calmly while Ino was gripping her seat tightly in fear with her eyes closed. Apparently she wasn't one for heights. Choji was worst off as he needed a barf bag soon after they took off. "They will hold up, but I don't think they will want to ride in this thing again," he said as he let out a chuckle. Naruto grinned as he said, "You get used to it after a while, and some of the other aircraft can reach heights higher than this." Asuma's eyes widened at that little detail before he saw they started to fly through the open mountain ranges that made up Lighting Country. "I see we're in Kaminari now." Naruto nodded his head as the radio came to life. "Naruto, how is the mission going so far?" Asuma looked odd hearing his father's voice over the radio. Naruto clicked his radio as he replied, "We just entered Lighting Country. I don't know how far we are from Kumo." A new voice answered over the radio. "Hokage-sama, this is Shin from Blackhawk 2. We're currently 30 miles south of Kumo." Naruto nodded his thanks to the pilot who gave him the thumbs up as Sarutobi's voice came over the radio. "Thank you, Shin. Remember to land outside the village so as to not to start a war." "Understood, sir. Can't wait to see some Kumonians piss themselves," Shin replied as he turned his focus back to piloting the chopper. Naruto chuckled as he heard Sarutobi do so also. "GG, this should go okay. Reaper team has reported the Raikage to be a man of action. However, when we land, it'll have the Blackhawk take off, so it may seem we're outnumbered." Sarutobi's voice was serious as it came over the line. "Keep safe, Naruto, and make sure Team 10 come back in one piece, understood? And hope you're having as much fun as I did, Asuma." Asuma chuckled as the radio went dead. "What did I get myself into?" Naruto grinned as he turned to him. "An A-rank mission to a probable hostile country." Asuma lowered his head as Naruto laughed. "Look on the bright side, your team will have a fancy A on their portfolios." Asuma nodded his head as something caught Naruto's eye as they passed a simple-looking hut. A large black man stood looking at him as they flew by. For some reason Naruto gave a slight wave, surprised as the man returned it before he lost sight of him. Killer Bee was training inside his hidden cave only by a few as he was talking to his Biju the Hachibi. "So what shall we rhyme about Hachibi?" He however was surprised when the voice didn't respond immediately as usual. "Go out, Bee, something is heading this way." He wasn't used to taking orders from his Biju, but something about the seriousness in his voice made him leave his cave. He waited outside, getting annoyed by the wild goose chase, but as he was about to enter his hut again, the sound of large swinging blades entered his ears. He turned, and what shocked him was a large black object was flying by, bearing a white Konoha emblem on the front and narrow tail. He saw there were people inside of it. He was surprised seeing a teen standing next to a Konoha Junin dressed in clothing he never saw before look straight at him. He saw the teen wave at him. He waved back dumbly as he lost sight of the teen as it disappeared towards the direction of Kumo. He took off in a flash, following the strange machine. He watched as it flew over Kumo before rounding the administration building before heading towards a large rock outcropping outside the village. Naruto waited until the chopper was near the ground before jumping out, followed by Team 10 and Naruto's team. He was surprised when the man he saw earlier landed a few feet away from him as the chopper took off again, hovering a couple hundred feet away. Killer Bee saw the teen had teammates dressed like him carrying weird weapons. Hachibi was oddly silent, more than he ever was. He was serious as he asked, "Who are you and what does Konoha want with Kumo?" Naruto said in a laid-back tone, "My name is Naruto, and we're here to deliver the Chunin exam's invitation to the Raikage." B looked at him for a minute, saying, "My name is Killer B, brother of the Raikage." As he said this, a large man landed next to B, making the ground crack slightly as a squad of Junin landed behind him. A was surprised when he saw the weird machine fly over his village. He was even more surprised it was carrying the Konoha emblem. However, instead of attacking, it flew off after circling his administration building. As he took off after it, followed by Team Samui. He felt his brother presence where the craft dropped off 7 people. Nothing had happened yet, so they weren't here to attack. He landed near his brother. "State your business here before I crush you." He released a wave of Ki, making the Junin sweat and forcing what had to be his Genin team fall to their knees. The other 3, however, merely looked bored as they snapped to attention. "We're here to deliver this year Chunin exam's invitations, and I would appreciate Raikage-sama if you would stop releasing Ki. The Genins are still new." The Ki stopped, much to the relief of Team 10. Though A still looked ready to attack, he said, "All this for a simple invitation? Who are you and what is the real purpose for your visit?" Naruto sighed as he pulled out a scroll, making 2 of the Junins who followed the Raikage to pull their swords. Naruto, however, sighed as he threw it to the Raikage. "I am Naruto, commander of the Konoha Rangers, and the reason for all this." The daimyo thought it would be a good idea to show the nation's Konohas new allies. B shook his head as he muttered, "Politics." Naruto nodded his head. "You're right, B-san. Politics is best left to civilians. If I had it my way, I wouldn't have wasted the time, seeing as how I have already lost people doing these stupid courier missions." He traced the scar across the face in remembrance. A looked up from the scroll with an eyebrow raised. Who would attack a diplomatic courier? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Hanzo apparently finally went completely nuts, as I was ambushed heading to AIM. A shook his head. AIM blatantly attacking a Konoha ally. The scroll was an invitation. He waved for the team behind him to stand down. "Well, who are you, friends?" Naruto scratched the back of his head. "Aw, sorry about that. This is Team 10, Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji, and Yamanaka Ino, and this is Sarutobi Asuma, their sensei." He turned to his team as he waved to them. "This is my teammates Scar and Joker. Right now we're currently waiting on a 4th member." A nodded his head as he said, "As you already know, B, I'm A. Behind me are my trusted Junin Samui, Karui, Omoi." Naruto nodded to the team, looking all of them in the eyes. He made sure not to look at what had to be Samui's large. However, Joker didn't have the same restraint as he giggled perversely. Naruto sighed. "You have permission." Everyone looked confused at him until Joker wound up being knocked to the ground with a handprint on his face. Naruto chuckled as he turned to the slowly sitting up Joker. "You're going to get into more trouble than you can get out of someday, Joker." Joker grumbled as he nodded his head in agreement as he stood back up. Naruto turned back to as he let out a deep laugh. "I like you, kid. You're alright. Tell Hokage Dono that I will be sending some teams this year and to see me during the 3rd exam, but I have a favor to ask." Naruto nodded his head with a smile. What would that be, Raikage-sama? When the exam comes around, would you mind picking me up in that machine over there? He asked as he pointed towards the chopper. Naruto scratched his chin while Team 10 was speechless as Naruto spoke on seemingly good terms with the Raikage. Shouldn't be too much of a hassle. I'll tell Gigi to send a hawk warning you when we will be showing up. He waved the chopper to land as he continued, would you like a ride back to your tower? I was shocked that he would agree and even ask if he wanted a ride. I would like to, but aren't you the least bit serious? My team will just kill you all when we're on it. Naruto grinned slightly as the chopper touched down. Nah, because if you did, it would just mean another war and more than likely not all of us would leave alive. The veiled threat was there, making the Raikage nod in approval. Team 10 was already sitting in their seat again as Joker and Scar took sitting positions at the edges. The Kumo group carefully got in, seeing technology beyond anything they had seen. Naruto jumped as he clicked his radio. Shin, take us back to the administration building to drop of Raikage-sama and his group, okay? The Kumo group saw the pilot turned around saying loudly, right, oh sir. The quick flight back was amusing to Naruto as he watched the Kumo ninjas watch in awe at being able to see the village from the sky without being on a mountain. Hovering over the building, the group jumped out before turning back to Naruto as he waved goodbye as the chopper flew away from the village. Samui turned to a saying, is this a good idea, Sama? A nodded his head as he rolled his shoulders around. That Naruto kid is strong. He didn't fall into a giggling mess when he saw you, Samui, so he has willpower. Konoha has changed and we need to learn of these changes. What are your thoughts about this, brother? B had been oddly silent the entire time and the group noticed it. He is different. I couldn't place it at first, but now I know, bro. A turned to him with a raised eyebrow. He was a former host. You felt his chakra. However, I got a taste of it and it feels nothing like regular chakra or yokai. A looked surprised. He had kept track of all the Jinchuriki since the last war. Rock had lost both of theirs, one who left the village and the other killed by missing nins. Mists were dead due to the ending of the civil war. Waterfalls was missing, presumed dead, and B and Yugito were Kumos. However, he had received a message from Yugito earlier. She was being followed by a group named Akatsuki. He had learned it was the same group who went after the Jinchuriki in Rock, which ended in many ninjas' death trying to protect the man. He couldn't take the chance, so he destroyed the note. He regretted it, but it was for the best of the village. However, the only Biju left was the Kyuubi. His eyes winded at that. He was the former host of Kyuubi. B nodded his head as he said, had to be, seeing as how the Yondaime defeated the Kyuubi before, but Hachibi says he can't feel the Kyuubi anymore, so he must have returned to his realm. Team Samui was shocked at this revelation. To them he looked and seemed like a normal teen. Apart from the chakra reservoirs of a cage, Karui spoke up, how is it possible, B-sensei? Anyone to have a Biju removed has died. If the Kyuubi broke free, how could he be standing there talking to us? A shook his head. The Kyuubi couldn't have broken free. I hate to say it, but the Yellow Flash was a seal master. Anything he did would hold a Biju. No, the boy must have released the Kyuubi of free will. B nodded his head in agreement to the reasoning, while the Junin looked shocked and thoughtful. Blackhawk 2. Asuma was staring at Naruto seriously. You think it was smart telling him you will get him when the exams come around? Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Yes, while it may seem dangerous, A-san won't start another war. Plus he seems to like me. He grinned, this last part making Asuma snort. Naruto looked down below them as they passed over an abandoned village. From reports it was destroyed during the war. However, when he turned back to Asuma, an explosion erupted below them, making the Blackhawk shake as it tried to regain control. Naruto was holding onto the surface of the chopper as it banked to the side. He heard Ino scream. Naruto turned and was thankful they were buckled in. However, he was surprised to see Asuma get knocked from his seat as he started to roll to the open door. Asuma yelled in shock as he rolled towards the open hatch. He gripped the side of the door as his body swung out. He looked down at the ground, seeing flames bellowing smoke. The aircraft shook again, making him lose his grip. His eyes widened as he felt weightless as he started to fall. However, before he could get far, a hand grabbed his wrist, gripping tight. He reflexively gripped the wrist as he looked up, seeing it was Naruto. Naruto started to pull the scared Junin back into the chopper. Once he was in, he applied chakra to the surface as his breath was ragged from the near-death experience. "Thank you, Naruto." Naruto nodded as he clicked his radio. "Bring us around, Shin. I want to see what caused that explosion." He got the affirmative as the chopper turned. What he saw made his eyes widen. The Nibi was fighting two ninjas dressed in black cloaks with red clouds on them. He watched as the Nibi spewed blue flames at the jumping ninja. They were forcing the demon back as one threw jutsus and the other swung a three-bladed scythe. Naruto cursed as he said, "Damn Akatsuki, Shin, fly low, my team will hop out, afterwards pour fire on the two men in black cloaks." Shin nodded as he sent the chopper into a slight dive towards the ground. Asuma turned to Naruto as the rangers prepared to jump. "Who are these Akatsuki and why not attack the demon?" Naruto looked at him as he said, "Intel has had them appear in different countries in teams of two. They seem to be gathering money for something and also hunting down the Jinchurikis. To what end I don't know, but reports say they have managed to capture a few." As he saw the ground was getting closer, he said, "The Nibi Nekomata last time I checked was still sealed in someone, so I'm saving the Jinchuriki." He finished as his team jumped out of the fast-moving chopper, rolling to a stop. They got up, running towards the crater as the sounds of combat continued. They arrived to see the same as before, however, as the roar of blades cut through the sound of battle. All three combatants looked up to see something they never saw before. Kakuzu looked up at the machine. He had never saw something like it before in his 100 of years of life, meaning the thing had to be priceless. However, he saw three teens standing above the crater looking down at them. Hidan was pissed that his battle was interrupted by something. Jashin demanded blood. He saw three teens that would do nicely as he grinned sadistically. The Nibi was in full control as Yugito trusted her to get her out of this mess. However, these two were proving troublesome as the gray-haired man proved difficult to kill. She was surprised, however, when she saw the thing in the air. She noticed the teens on the crater weren't looking at her but towards the two men aiming weird weapons when her ears caught one mutter, "Open fire." What happened shocked the three as the flying machine opened fire with a loud versh. Hidan didn't even have time to react as his upper body was ripped from its waist as rounds shredded through him. Kakuzu's eyes widened at the display of fire power. He started to run towards the teens, forgetting about the Nibi. Naruto saw the man running towards him as him and his team opened fire. Kakuzu felt the rounds entire his chest before exiting out the back. Two of his masks cracked as the rounds punctured them. He fell down in a heap, feeling two of his hearts stop beating. Naruto slid down the side of the mountain as he saw Kakuzu jump up, seemingly not in pain, before disappearing. He cursed as he couldn't feel his presence anymore. He walked over to the seemingly still alive man who was laughing. "Ah, the pain. It's glorious." Naruto shook his head as he frowned down at the man. "How are you still alive, bastard?" Hidan looked up to see it was one of the teens. He grinned viciously. "Jashin-sama grants me immortality, so you will never kill me. He will taste your blood as I slowly kill you." He, however, wasn't expecting what the teen said to his team. "Grab his arms and get ready to throw him." Joker and Scar both grabbed the mon's arms, holding him down. Naruto pulled out a grenade. "This is AM7 fragmentation grenade. Let's see if immortality can save you from this." Hidan looked confused when the teen crouched down as he pulled the pin. He held the handle before releasing it, quickly shoving the grenade into the mon's mouth. "Now." Joker and Scar both launched the upper body away from them. The man attempted to get the thing out of his mouth, however 3 seconds was too quick for him as his head exploded and his upper body exploded into chunks, spraying red mist across the ground. It was dead quiet as the supposed immortal didn't move again. Naruto sighed as he turned, seeing the Nibi go in a defensive stance, hissing, "Jinchuriki, we aren't here to hurt you. You can take back control now," Naruto said as he waited for whoever to revert back to their human form. However, he was surprised when a deep feminine voice spoke. Nibi grinned maliciously at the death and wounding of her attackers. However, she wasn't stupid. She saw the Konoha emblem. She was surprised when the teens didn't attack right away but said they weren't here to harm her kitten. I find it hard to believe from someone from Konoha would save my host, but, what's this? You have Kyuubi's smell on you, who are you? Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose, will I never be rid of the stench of that fox? Sighing, Naruto readdressed the demon as he realized who he was talking to. Ah, Nibi-san, I take it your host let you gain control. He saw it nod its head. I'm Naruto, commander of the Konoha Rangers, and I was the host of the Kyuubi a few years back. Nibi's eyes widened at that, but she hissed menacingly, how can that be? Every host dies if we are removed, you must still have the Kyuubi. Naruto shook his head as he pointed to his cheeks. I lost my whiskers when I released the Kyuubi. This caused Nibi's eyes to widen, a host freely releasing his biju. It was unheard of, however she saw the truth before her. The boys show the mark of the Kyuubi. Each host always had a mark. Males always had one on the face while the females had one on their body. Her kitten had two tail-like tattoos at the base of her spine. She relaxed as the boy Naruto spoke again. I can give your host medical attention. The longer you have hold, the longer the yokai enters her chakra system. I give you my word your host will be looked out after and have the protection of the rangers. Nibi looked at her options and saw they were then as her host was banged up pretty badly and even her quick healing wouldn't be able to save her. Sighing, the cat demon sat on its hunches. I'm trusting you, brat. You do anything to kitten and I'll make sure you pay very dearly. With that, the yokai cloak receded as a woman's body fell down to the ground. Naruto made it to her in time before she hit the ground. Catching her, he clicked his radio. Shin, bring the chopper down, we got a severely injured woman needing medical attention ASAP. As the chopper touched down in the crater, Naruto carried the woman inside of it before laying her softly down. He turned to Scar. Patch up what you can. Scar nodded as he got to work as the Black Hawk took off heading to Konoha. Asuma looked down at the woman. He said, I hope you know what you're doing, Naruto. She is a Cloud Junin from her attire. This could classify as kidnapping. Naruto took a seat as he watched Scar heal her. The wreckage left her to die. That's the only explanation, as he wouldn't want to lose a Jinchuriki. He must know of Akatsuki and what happened at Iwa. Asuma looked confused as he asked, what happened in Iwa that would make the wreckage abandon her? Naruto sighed as he said, from the intel that came in a couple years back, Akatsuki attacked Iwa to get one of their Jinchurikis. They succeeded in getting the Biju along with killing many rock ninjas. The wreckage must have been thinking about his military strength and decided to cut his losses. Ino, who was sitting from her position, said, that's horrible, how could he do such a thing? Naruto looked at Team 10 seriously as he said, it's politics, Ino. Since we're in peacetime right now, wars are fought through spying and paperwork. Ino looked shocked as her and the rest of Team 10 looked thoughtful about this new development. Naruto clicked his radio. Base, this is the commander. Is Hokage-sama there? There was a minute of silence before. Yes, Naruto, I'm here. Has something happened? Naruto bit his lip, trying to figure out how to explain this to the Hokage. Yes and no, Gigi. The mission is a success and we're returning to base, however we hit a snag on the way back. And what snag would that be, Naruto? Asked the aged Hokage over the radio. Naruto slightly winced hearing the exasperation in his voice. We ran into a fight between two Akatsuki members. They were battling the Jinchuriki of the Nibi. We managed to kill one and make the other flee, but right now we're heading back with a wounded woman, Naruto told him, hoping his Gigi wouldn't get too mad. There was silence for a couple minutes before he heard a serious Sarutobi say, Naruto, you do know the Nibi Jinchuriki is a Cloud Junin. And did you think about a plan before you entered a fight between two S-class missing NINS and a Jinchuriki? Naruto winced as he saw Asuma snicker at him. Yes sir, I kind of told her I would give her ranger protection. Naruto, we're going to have a talk when you get back. The seriousness in his voice made Naruto flinch. He asked quietly, am I in trouble, Hokage-sama? He decided to show some respect as the Hokage sounded mad. The reply made his fears confirmed. Yes Naruto, you are. See you when you return. No more saving damsels in distress today, got me. Naruto sighed as he sat back in his seat. Yes Hokage-sama, see you when we return. Konoha, an hour later. Sarutobi watched as the Black Hawk landed outside of the hospital as Team 10 hopped out, followed by Naruto, who was followed by Scar and Joker carrying the woman on a stretcher. The doctors were already waiting for them as they took the stretcher before heading into the building. Team 10 and Asuma left soon after to get some lunch after a successfully completed mission. Naruto, however, was left standing in front of irritated-looking Hokage. "What's up, Gigi?" asked Naruto nervously as he watched the old mont's eyebrow twitch. "Naruto, while I understand why you saved the woman, why didn't you take her back to Kumo? This could cause a war," he said seriously as he followed Naruto into the hospital. Naruto sighed as he stopped before turning towards the Hokage as he said seriously, "They left her for dead, Gigi. While I know of the risks they believe she has been taken by Akatsuki, she had to have been battling the two men for a while as she went into full demon form." Sarutobi frowned at that revelation, so she has full control. Seeing him nod, Sarutobi sighed, "Then what will you do with her since she is your ward as of this moment?" Naruto's head swiveled to him, eyes wide, however he grinned, "While I won't take her in the Rangers, I think she would make a nice addition to Konoha's ninja force. That's if she agrees, if not, I'll let her do what she wants." Sarutobi could feel his headache grow a little bit more. "And what about the Kumo delegation that is supposed to arrive for the exams?" Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Can ask if she would dye her hair, but these are all maybes, seeing as how she probably won't be awake for a day or two. Sarutobi nodded his head but asked a question, "Well, when will you be leaving for Kiri?" Naruto got a huge grin on his face. "After I made sure she is taken care of, but I got a surprise that some of my clones have been working on ever since the base was completed." Sarutobi felt his blood run slightly cold at that smirk on Naruto's face. "And pray tell, what surprise is that?" Naruto let out a slightly evil chuckle as he said, "You will get to see it on it revealing. I can say it will change Konoha's power a little bit more." Sarutobi shook his head as he left Naruto to wait for the woman to awaken. Next day, Niyugito awoke to her entire body feeling like it had been trampled on. She was used to the feeling as it was customary for using the biju for too long. While she was unconscious, Nibi had filled her in on what had happened after she let her have control. She feared opening her eyes to see a dank cell somewhere in Konoha. However, she was mildly surprised seeing the white ceiling. Looking around, she saw she was indeed in a hospital. She also noticed that they hadn't even restrained her in any way. A cough caught her attention, seeing a blonde sitting in the chair next to her. She saw he had the Konoha emblem but was wearing a uniform she never saw before. "How are you feeling, Ni-san?" She grimaced. "Like I got mugged by two men, so you're the Naruto Nibi told me about." Naruto nodded his head as he asked seriously, "I need you to answer a question, Ni-san. Did you ever send a message to the Raikage telling him you were being attacked by Akatsuki?" The darkening look was all he needed as an answer. "Yes, I can't believe the bastard would leave me to die." Naruto nodded sadly as he said, "Politics, a ninja's worst enemy." Yugito frowned but found the phrase to be right. However, she asked, "So what's going to happen to me now? Seeing as Kumo believes me dead, it could be interrogation, or a cell, or biju removal." She felt a hand smack the side of her head lightly, making her glare at the blonde. "None of that, you get to choose what you want to do." Yugito coughed slightly. "I get to choose? Like what do I get to choose?" Naruto sat back as he said, "What you want to do. As of now you're my ward, however I don't like controlling people, so you can do whatever you want. Become of Kunoichi of Leaf, leave the village to wander around until Akatsuki tracks you down, or retire to the quiet life receiving weekly stipends from me, or return to Kumo." This caused Yugito's eyes to widen as she didn't see he was joking. He was serious about all of them. She started to have an internal debate with Nibi. "What should I do, Nibi?" Nibi was just as surprised as her. No man or village leader would let a Jinchuriki go freely. However, seeing as how to become a ninja of the village you needed the Hokage's approval, as he seemed to already give it. "I don't know, kitten. Those bastards in Kumo left us to rot. This boy, no young man, saved you from Akatsuki." Yugito mentally nodded her head in agreement. However, she thought, Yes, but everything comes at a price. I bet this guy is a pervert waiting for his reward. He spoke her thoughts. So is this how you get your rocks off? Watching women sleep. Naruto chuckled as he said, while the sight is beautiful. No, I don't. I was reading mission reports and intel while you were asleep. This caused both Yugito and Nibi to sweat drop at the explanation. Yugito turned back to her inner dialogue. He was reading. A beautiful woman lying unconscious next to him and he doesn't try anything. Wait, he called me beautiful. This caused Yugito to blush lightly as the Nibi roared with laughter. Oh, he is a keeper kitten. Yugito blushed even harder, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow at her. Something wrong, Ni-san? Yugito shook her head negatively. Just going over my options with Nibi. Naruto nodded his head in understanding before pulling out another folder before reading the report on Wave. Yugito sighed as she thought to Nibi, what should I do, Nibi? I don't want to leave cause Akatsuki will just find me again. For the first time since she was young she felt useless. Nibi felt sad about what her kitten was going through, so she said, well, as he said you could live the quiet life, but we both know that wouldn't work well for you, so the only option would be to become a ninja of the leaf. Yugito could see the logic. She always got stir crazy with being unable to do something. She forced her resolve about her choice as she turned back to Naruto. She was shocked to see him talking to the Hokage. Naruto saw she seemed to be done talking to Nibi. He stopped updating the Hokage on the situation as he turned to her. Ni-san, I would like you to meet the Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen. Gigi, this is Ni Yugito, container of the Nibi. Yugito nodded her head respectfully. Hokage-sama, if I decide to join Konoha, what position would I be in? Sarutobi sighed as he put his arms behind him. More than likely a Junin. If you did decide, there would be a 6-month watch period in which you would have to meet with Naruto here. However, apart from that, in the unique situation we now find ourselves in, you may need to dye your hair. Yugito was shocked at such a lenient join period. All that was required was to check in with Naruto every now and then, but then she asked, why would I need to dye my hair? I don't think any Kumo ninja to come near Konoha. Sarutobi seemed to rub his temples. Due to Konoha's new allies, the daimyo requested that this year's invitations be delivered by Naruto and his rangers. Naruto somehow impressed the Tsuchikage, Kazekage, and the Raikage, who have stated that they would be here at this year's exams. Yugito was shocked. This was the first time the Kages would meet in person since the ceasefire treaty was signed almost 13 years ago. However, the Mizukage wasn't included, so she voiced her thoughts. What about the Mizukage? Sarutobi looked at Naruto, who spoke up, rubbing the back of his neck. I was going to be heading there after I made sure you were well and taken care of. This caused her to smile at the kindness while she heard Nibi repeat, keeper. Inside her mind, making her blush, Naruto stood as he said, well, seeing as how you seem to be better, I can go. Gigi, I'll pay for Team 2 to help her get acquainted in the village, also set her up with an apartment, take the necessary funds out of my account. Yugito felt saddened that he was already leaving. However, when Naruto saw her face, he said, I'm sorry for leaving so abruptly, but the exams are drawing closer, and the sensei of Team 2 you should be able to like. She was my predecessor as the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. This caused Yugito's mouth to drop in amazement, as Konoha had 2 people to ever survive a removal of a Biju. Sarutobi shook his head as he said his goodbyes to Yugito as he followed Naruto outside. They walked outside as a chopper was waiting for them. Naruto got on, followed by Sarutobi, as Scar handed him a large scroll. The rangers are already in position, and the new clones have ran simulations and are ready. Sarutobi raised an eyebrow. New clones, Naruto. Naruto grinned. It's all part of the surprise. I need to make more for this, but you should like it. He nodded as the Blackhawk took off, followed by the other one, as a Chinook lifted off soon after. The flight to the sea near the Great Ranger Bridge was short. The first Blackhawk landed, letting out a squad of rangers before Naruto's chopper touched down, letting his team and the Hokage off. As the Chinook landed and let out its troops, Sarutobi finally got a good look at the new clones. Most of them were wearing blue pants with a light blue shirt. A few were wearing tan pants along with a tan shirt. Naruto grinned at the Hokage. Meet Konoha's new naval group. Sarutobi looked incredulous at Naruto. To be a naval group they need a ship. As he said this his eyes widened as he looked at the large scroll Naruto was carrying. Naruto unrolled the scroll before throwing it towards the water as a plume of smoke appeared followed by a giant splash. The old Hokage's jaw dropped as he took in the new ship. It was at least 60 yards long and had 2 turrets on bow and 2 on the stern, and he could see 4.50 caliber turrets placed in strategic points on the ship. However, the name of it was the FCS Will of Fire. He turned to Naruto as he said, "This is a Fletcher class. While doesn't have the technology as the others, we had to make her from scratch." He finished as a Humvee pulled into the clearing the group was gathered in. Naruto said as he turned to it, "I see they're on time." Sarutobi turned as he watched Zabuza be pulled out with his arm tied behind his back. He was followed by a Haku dressed in ranger gear with only AM9 strapped to her leg along with a storage pouch on the other. Zabuza whistled when he saw the ship. "Damn Gaki, all this for me." "You shouldn't have," he said arrogantly. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. "You and Haku will be riding the waves in Konoha's new naval power. I would say it's fitting for the demon of the mist to have a massive entourage," he joked as he turned back to the Hokage. "Well, Gigi, I know you have a council meeting soon, so I won't keep you longer. However, when you get some free time, I'll take you out on a voyage," Naruto said to the old man who nodded. "I would like that, Naruto. Just don't give too much of a scare to the Mizukage. Have a safe voyage," Sarutobi said as he walked back towards a chopper that just touched down. The excess Rangers loaded back up before the choppers took off again, heading back to Konoha. The FCS Will of Fire broke through a small wave as it was nearing the Kumogakure's port. The ship easily was larger than the small wooden fishing boats and transports it passed on its way here. Everyone couldn't believe their eyes seeing the ship fly the Konoha flag. Naruto grinned as he remembered more than a few ships lowered their sails to watch the ship pass seemingly without the power of wind. The salty air had Zabuza seemingly remember his times here while Haku talked quietly to him a few feet away from him. He was glad he had sent a messenger hawk beforehand warning them that they would be arriving by ship to deliver important documents and a prisoner. He could barely make out the small gathering of shinobi at the port. He noticed Scar had walked up behind him. "I just got done reporting to Hokage-sama we were entering the port." Naruto tilted his head to the side as he said, "Good, hopefully the new Mizukage won't be a pain. However, I believe the ship is a success, don't you think?" Scar nodded his head as Joker walked up next to them. Overhearing Naruto, he said, "Meaning we successfully awed every port and ship from here to the Fire Country? Yeah, I would say it's a success." Naruto let out a small laugh as he smacked Joker in the arm. "Yes, Joker. However, with this little display, more missions should be coming to Konoha. Oh, how I hate politics." A new voice entered the conversation. "So do I, Brad, but you seem to be gifted in it. Who knows, you may just become a political figure soon." Naruto turned and saw both Zabuza and Haku had joined them. Sighing, Naruto said, "I hate to admit it, but due to this it may happen. However, I still plan on being on a team for a long time while I leave the politics to the Hokage. I think you will be taking that from me, Naruto. I would never have managed to get the cages to agree to come. However, I have just got missives from Sand, Rock, and Cloud that we will need to discuss once you return." Sarutobi's voice came over the radio. Naruto turned to see Joker grin as he released the mic button, causing Naruto's eyebrow to twitch, getting a laugh from the gather group. Naruto clicked his mic as he replied, "Yes, Gigi, we're getting ready to dock, so I'll check in once we're done." He watched as the Will of Fire pulled up alongside a pier. He could finally make out some of the Kiri ninjas who were waiting. He could tell that there were at least 2 squads of Anbu standing behind 3 people. One looked like a teen carrying 2 swords over his shoulder while the other stood dressed in hunter nin garb. The last one had to be the Mizukage as she stood wearing a variation of the Mizukage ceremonial robes. Her hair was a shocking red that fell behind her shoulders with a small bun on top. As the ramp was lowered to the pier, Naruto took the lead as his team surrounded Zabuza. Naruto heard Zabuza chuckle slightly from behind him. Titling his head over his shoulder, he asked, "What's funny, Zabuza?" Zabuza nodded towards the teen. "I know most of these people. The teen's name is Chojuru. The mon's name is Ao and the Mizukage is an X, Terami May. Naruto winced slightly at that as he said, ouch, does she hold any hard feelings? Zabuza winced in remembrance, how do you think I lost my eyebrows? Naruto shook his head. He reached the awaiting group as he said, Mizukage-sama, I would like to present the prisoner Momochi Zabuza. This caused the woman's eyes to widen before she smirked, so the bastard managed to finally get caught. How many did you lose capturing his pathetic? Naruto could feel Zabuza flinch at hearing that. He turned to Zabuza, who was silently begging him to make some grandiose story. Actually, none. Zabuza here got why, and we actually had to heal him after we were done. This caused the group's eyes to widen. The feared demon of the mist was caught easily after so many of their hunter nins died. Naruto pushed a grumbling Zabuza towards their group as he pulled out 2 scrolls along with a few tags. Here is the Chunin exam invitation, Kubikiri Haucho, and these tags are to remove the chakra suppressant seal on him, he said as he handed them to the Mizukage. May was surprised when she received a messenger bird a few days ago telling her that a prisoner would be delivered via boat along with important documents from Konoha. However, she was slightly awed along with her ninjas when they saw the ship that pulled into port. While it wasn't the first metal ship, it however looked slightly intimidating with the cannons on it and the weird smaller ones. She was even more surprised when a teen led his group that surrounded Zabuza. She looked at Zabuza, seeing he seemed to be standing tall and strong just as he had been when he left to try and assassinate the Sandaime Mizukage. I see he wasn't tortured for information, that surprises me, she said as she saw Zabuza laugh at the question. The brat didn't even ask for anything. Hell, if I wasn't incarcerated I would say I was taking a vacation. He said as he remembered a few times the guards played cards with him and gave a few more necessities for a more enjoyable stay than he was expecting. Naruto shook his head as Zabuza said that, we didn't torture him because it would be pointless, any information he had would be out of date, also seeing as how you're the new Mizukage things would change from his time in the village. This shocked May as no one outside of the water country knew there was a new Mizukage. How did you know that, as we haven't had any other ninja come here since the start of the civil war? Naruto waved his hand slightly. Now that would be telling my secrets, Mizukage-sama, but I have my ways. But back to the current situation, do you have an answer or will you send a reply via Hawk? May wanted to learn more about this teen who had yet to give his name. I will give an answer if you would join me in my office to answer some of my questions. Naruto saw the group was shocked she would ask him. He also noticed he hadn't introduced himself yet. I can stay a bit, and sorry, where are my manners? I am Naruto, commander of the Konoha Rangers. My squad mates are Scar, Joker, and Haku. May gave a smile at learning the teen's name, whose eyes refused to drift to the considerable amount of cleavage she was showing. She noticed the one named Joker was having harder time as he looked everywhere else. I'm Terami May the Mizukage. Beside me is Chojuru, part of the Mist 7 swordsmen. The one-eyed man is Ao. What is wrong with your friend? She asked as she motioned to Joker, who blushed at the scrutiny as Naruto turned to him. He lowered his head. Naruto sighed as he said, he is trying to act civil in front of a beautiful woman, and he learned his lesson when we visited the Raikage a few days ago. However, when he finished that sentence he dogged to the side as Ao seemed to get mad when Naruto called May beautiful. Ao charged with a drawn kunai intended to scare the teen who spoke out of place about their Mizukage. He was surprised when the teen easily dodged before he felt a leg kick the back of his knee, forcing him on his knees as his arm was twisted. He something press against his neck. He heard a click as a cold voice spoke. Mizukage, give me one good reason not to kill this man for attacking a dignitary along with commander of Konoha's new allies. Naruto spoke coldly as he held the pistol against the mon's neck. His teammates already leveled their weapons to the mist ninja, who also pulled weapons. May was surprised at that exclamation as the boy went from cheery and aloof to cold and calculating. She saw the ship's cannons turn towards them as the other people on board aimed weapons at them. She cursed inwardly at the stupidity of Ao. This meeting was supposed to start a new beginning for Mist, but now it could be ruined. I am sorry, Naruto. Ao is hot-headed and easily perceives insults when praise is given. It won't happen again. She the last part menacingly towards Ao. Naruto sighed as he removed the weapon before throwing the man back towards the group. He motioned for his group to lower his weapons as the Mizukage did the same. I understand, I would hate for blood to be shed over something so pointless, however due circumstances lately any more attacks will be met with lethal force. Mei nodded her head, but motions for him to follow her as she sent her Anbu away. Naruto was surprised when she released the cuffs holding Zabuza along with applying the tags he had given her to him. Now Zabuza, I'm paying you back for weakening the Yondaime. Your status as a Junin will be reinstated, she said as she handed him the scroll containing his sword. Zabuza grinned as he said, thanks Mizukage-sama, wow that feels weird calling you that. He turned to her before a hand slapped his face, and that is for being a bastard for going on your own. They heard laugh from their position. They turned and saw it was Joker who was grinning while the rest smiled at the moment. Ha, you're so whipped, Zabuza. Naruto shook his head as he said, you're just getting him back because he cleaned you out in poker. This caused Joker to grumble, he had beginner's luck, that's all. Naruto shook his head as he said, well, it's good to see Zabuza get repaid for his actions. Zabuza turned to him as he grinned evilly towards Naruto. I told you I would make you pay, brat, when I get free, he said as he started to walk towards Naruto menacingly until a voice stopped him. I don't think so, Zabuza-sama, Haku said as ice needles formed in the air making him sweat. Okay Haku, I won't do anything, no need for violence, he said as he turned. He muttered a soft, yet. He felt a pain in his rear as he saw a needle lodged there. He turned back to Haku to see her grinning mischievously with no needles in sight. He kept grumbling about blondes taking his subordinates as they finally reached the administration building. Stepping into the office, Mei took a seat as Zabuza, ow, and Chojuru took standing positions behind her as Naruto stood before the desk as his team leisurely stood behind him. So what were those circumstances you spoke about earlier, Naruto-san? Mei asked as she poured herself some water. Naruto sighed as he took a seat in front of the desk as he said, I have been attacked multiple times when delivering these invitations, and I have already lost good men to an ambush. Mei raised an eyebrow as she saw Naruto subconsciously rub the scar along his cheek. Who in their right minds would attack a messenger? Naruto smiled sadly as he said, apparently Hanzo, and I believe he finally got off his rocker because we were ambushed by multiple AIM ninja west of AIM. Mei nodded as she asked in a soft voice, how many did you lose? Naruto sighed as he thought back to that day. 5 men, however I was told that 130 Junin and Chunin lost their lives attempting to kill us. This shocked the 4 present as they couldn't believe only 5 people died while inflicting serious casualties. What about that ship? While I have seen metal ships before, I can say I have never seen anything like that before. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. It's the first of Konoha's naval power, and it's a Fletcher-class destroyer. Mei had never heard of such a thing but asked, you said you didn't interrogate Zabuza but most villages would, so that leaves me to guess you kept him somewhere else. Naruto nodded his head at her deduction. Yes, we kept him in the base's new prison, and he stayed in a modest cell and was given a few things to make his stay pleasurable. Mei turned to Zabuza as he grinned, the brat knows how to host guests. Aren't you afraid Zabuza will tell me secrets about your base and people? She asked curiously, seeing how Naruto would respond. Naruto shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. It crossed my mind, however the base is easy to find, and what he probably learn will just lead him to tell you not to with us. He said that last seriously, so this Naruto was blunt and to the point. She sighed as he was just telling her what she asked. She was trying to get a rise out of him as she bent forward showing more cleavage. So who are these Konoha Rangers? And what is their purpose? Naruto shook his sadly seeing the women teasing him. He heard a slight giggling from behind him as he said, can you take care of that Haku? A smack to the back of the head later. Joker was blindfolding himself to resist the urge. The Rangers are a group of specialized soldiers that are the main defense of Konoha and police force. While small teams may be sent out on missions, we won't partake in an invasion of a country. Mei was slightly awed at the description, just a defense force. It was laughable in the elemental nations, However, from what he said, if just a small group could defeat a 130 ninja and only lose 5 men, then those odds were good, too good. She sighed as it seemed that the world had changed since they had been cut off from them during the Civil War, so she guessed it was time to make an appearance. I must ask, as you seem to already have met the other cages, have they already given their answers? Naruto nodded his head as he said, they are going to be there for the third exam. While I would have gone here first to drop of Zabuza, I wanted to wait for the Will of Fire to be finished. May nodded her head as she could see the logic. Sighing, she said, I'll send teams this year and will be there for the third exam to show my support. However, I request that you be the one to show me around the village when I arrive. This caused everyone to turn to her surprised. Naruto grinned as he winked at her. Hi Mizukage-sama, it would be my pleasure. However, my time has run out, so I must be bidding you a farewell until then. She pouted at losing the chance to play around with her new toy some more, but nodded her head. Very well, Naruto, until the exams then. Naruto saluted before his team followed him out, surprised that he would agree when he didn't for the other cages. However, Naruto could tell May was going to try and play with him some more, so it was like a challenge to him. As they left, Chojuru finally spoke up. He seems strong, May-sama. Do you think he would be in the exams? May shook her head as she said, I don't believe so. However, send a missive to the daimyo and Hokage requesting he partake the exam with his team. If I'm right and he somehow convinced the other cages, they would request him too. May turned to Zabuza seriously, and was what he said was true. Zabuza already understood what she was asking. I would highly advise doing what he said. They let me have a cell with a window and I seen some of the things they have. While the ship is something to fear, he has things that could easily wipe the mist of the map. May was shocked as Zabuza wasn't one to usually back down from a fight, but she saw the fear and the truth in his eyes. Tell me everything. Naruto grinned as he reboarded the ship. It slowly started to pull away from the port. He dismissed his team to eat as he reported into the Hokage. Gigi, just letting you know the delivery was successful. The new Mizukage is Terumi May. From what I can tell, she has double my reservoirs. There was silence until Sarutobi's voice came over the radio. That's good to hear, Naruto. What is the answer and how friendly are they? Naruto sighed as he leaned against the railing. She said she would be there also. They seem friendly enough. She asked for me to be her guide when she arrives though. There was silence until Sarutobi asked, Are you alone? Naruto heard the seriousness in his voice as he stood up. Yeah, why? He heard Sarutobi sigh. I received missives from the daimyo along with some from the other cages. They have requested your presence in the exams. Seeing as how you are our new allies, we will need to show our new strength. Naruto cursed. He wasn't expecting that. He didn't know what the exams would be, just where they would be held. Sighing, he said, This is unexpected. I didn't think I had made that much of an impression. More than likely the Mizukage will be doing the same. He understood that it was needed, but the Rangers weren't ninjas. He frowned as he was watching the sunset. I know you're non-ninjas, Naruto, but it's politics, so I'll enter your names into the list. This year's exams is going to be larger than we ever thought. Each of the great ninja villages are sending at least a minimal of 2 teams, while it seems they have had their allies do the same. Right now the results so far are 326 Chunin hopefuls being sent. Naruto eyes widened at that. From what he read, the last huge exam only held a 150, and it was held in Suna that time. Will the original plans for the exams be able to do that amount? He heard Sarutobi seem to think. No, however, the same locations are going to be used, but new challenges are being laid out right now as I speak, and no, I'm not going to tell them to you. Naruto pouted slightly. Damn, I understand though. I'll be back in Konoha tomorrow. The Will of Fire will patrol the sea bordering Fire Country after they drop us off in Wave. Understood, Naruto. I'll see you tomorrow. The exams will be in 2 weeks, Sarutobi stated before leaving for his office to complete some more paperwork. Naruto sighed as he went down to join his team, letting them know the news while they ate. Afterwards he went to his assigned bunk as he thought that this was starting to be more trouble than needed. Next day, the Will of Fire docked in Wave, letting off Naruto's team before a Blackhawk picked them to ferry them back to Konoha. the flight was uneventful during the sunny day. Arriving back in Konoha could already see ninjas scurrying around making preparations for the exams. Naruto gave his team the week off seeing as how they had finally completed their long-term mission. Naruto himself was casually walking around Konoha. He was dressed in casual wear, but as of late he took to carrying his M9 secreted on his person in case of an emergency. He was bored with nothing to do, but seeing the joyful expressions of the villagers kept him in a good mood. He was passing a few bars that were prospering due to the ninjas being able to lose some of the work while the new rangers visited from time to time when they were off duty. He was idly thinking about going into one when a voice called out his name. He turned and saw it was Kushina. "Ah, Kushina-chan, how have you been?" Naruto asked idly as she reached him. She gave him a soft smile. "I have been good, Naruto-kun. What are you doing wandering around?" Naruto shrugged his shoulders as he waved to a couple of kids who were pointing and whispering about him. "Taking a break, finally completed delivering all the invitations, so thought I would take a look around the city. Did you manage to get Nissan settled in?" Kushina was surprised that he completed that already, however she said, "Oh, Yugito-chan seems to like it here. She told me you were the one who saved here and I'm grateful you did, Naruto. Now I have a new friend." Naruto nodded his head but was surprised as Kushina grabbed his hand and started to pull him back towards a bar he passed a few minutes ago. "Come on, some Junin took the day off early to celebrate the exams. Yugito is there too." Naruto let her drag him into the bar and he was surprised to see how many Junins seemed to be in there. Anko, Kurenai, Yugito, Kakashi, Asuma, Might Guy, Gecko Hayate, who was talking to a purple-haired woman Naruto could have sworn he's seen somewhere before. He also noticed the Inuzuka clan head Sume and her daughter Hana, along with countless other Junin he didn't know. Naruto blinked as all the attention was drawn to the two. Kushina-chan, isn't this place for Junin only?" His voice carried over the sudden quietness of the bar until he heard Kakashi say, "Yo Naruto, join us and tell me where you been lately." Everything seemed to go back to normal, but people kept glancing at Naruto, making him feel nervous as he walked with Kushina towards the table where Kakashi, "I was just finishing up delivering the invitations to the cages, just got back from mist a couple hours ago." This caused an amusing reaction from the group as Kakashi lowered his Ika with his single eye widen. Anko started to cough as she just took a drink, forcing Kurenai to pat her back. Asuma's cigarette fell from his mouth onto the table. "You went to Mist. I thought they were still in the Civil War," asked Anko once she got control of herself. Naruto didn't notice that the rest of the bar was quietly listening in as they pretended to keep talking. Naruto shrugged his shoulder as he took a sip of sake he was handed by a waitress. "Nah, that ended a couple of months ago. The new Mizukage was sworn in a week ago, so I dropped off Zabuza. Funny enough, he is now a Junin of Mist." This caused Asuma to raise an eyebrow. "How that happen? I thought he was being hunted by Hunter Nin." Naruto saw the gather group nod their heads. The new Mizukage was an old comrade, and she repaid him by giving him this. The group seemed to nod in understanding until Kakashi said, "Wait, you said she, so the Mizukage is a female?" Naruto grinned slightly at that as the females in the bar were glad to hear that a female was a cage. "Yeah, she seems nice enough. Her name is Terumi May, she is apparently Zabuza's ex." This caused the group jaws to drop. Zabuza actually had a girlfriend, however before they could ask a question they were interrupted by the arrival of Inuzuka Sume. "Did my ears deceive me, or did you say you delivered this year's invitations? How did you manage to get all the cages to agree to come?" The few Junin who didn't know this already looked at the blonde teen in shock. This teen had met all the cages and had somehow managed to get them to come to the exams. "I didn't really do nothing special, just delivered the invitations. I could guess they wanted to see who were Konoha's new allies in person. They requested that I partake in the exam." Yugito was slightly shocked. "They want you to be in the exam? Don't they know that they're asking death wishes on their students?" Naruto shrugged his shoulders as he felt the effects of the alcohol start to take effect. "I don't plan on killing anyone, but some of the exams from what I can tell will have fights to the death from what I can tell, so it's hard telling." Hana had followed her mother over as she took a chair next to her. She said, "So Naruto, can you tell us about the cages?" He smiled as he started to tell them. As the alcohol started to flow, the conversation ranged from many different topics continuing into the late hours. For once Naruto felt accepted as he made new friends among the group. Next morning contains. Naruto eyes opened up as he felt pounding of his head. The sun pierced through the small window of his apartment, seemingly mocking him with its brightness. He tried remembering how he had gotten home but soon realized he couldn't remember anything after 10 last night. As the alcohol had began flowing more freely, everyone was in cheery mood. He remembered that he had Yugito and Kushina both sitting in his lap, but then things went blank. He attempted to sit up, but that was when he noticed a few things. 1. He was. 2. He had a woman on top of him as he felt her assets pressed into his chest as she soundly slept on his chest. 3. He could feel 2 others wrapped around his arms. And 4. His rod seemed to be still in the woman on top of him. He cursed inwardly, knowing he was trapped. He feared for his manhood as he looked at the hair of the women laying with him. Brown, red, and Yugito's new blue hair. Then as he attempted get his hands free, he found out they were being latched onto tightly as his hands cupped the women's flowers. He felt the blush start to form, cursing as his manhood started to get harder, making the women on top of him moan in her sleep. Kushina started to stir on his right at the noise, causing his hand rub her slit, making her moan. The mysterious brown hair woman on his right stirred slightly before going still. Yugito seemed to be having a good dream as she started to rock slightly on top of him, moaning softly while still asleep. Naruto couldn't find a way out and sighed as he accepted that he was probably going to die soon. He just wished that he could remember last night. Kushina awoke to the feeling over her slit being rubbed slightly. She moaned in pleasure as a finger slipped into her. She felt herself holding an arm. She snapped open her eyes to see it was Naruto's arm, and that he was awake also but was seemingly resigned about something. That was when she noticed that it wasn't just her and him but Yugito along with. No, it couldn't be. "Naruto-kun, do you know who is on your left?" She whispered quietly to him as he kept on fingering her, making her blush, but she didn't stop him. Naruto shook his head slightly. "I can't even remember how I got home last night. What the hell did I do?" He whispered back fiercely as the body on his left started to stir again. "It's Sume, and let's just say you kept us entertained last night." She giggled a bit perversely at that last part. While she didn't think she would share Naruto, he seemed to be able to keep up with all of them. Yugito seemed to be enjoying another round, if by her movement and moaning was to tell anything. Naruto's eyes widened in fear as he turned towards the mop of brown hair that now had eyes looking at him. He grinned nervously. Hi Sume-chan." Sume awoke to the whispering. She wasn't as drunk last night, so she remembered whose arm she was holding on to. Good morning Naruto-kun, how was last night?" Naruto's sweat dropped. He was expecting her to freak out, however this development was way better. I hate to say it but I can't remember." Sume couldn't believe that the teen managed to 3 hot women at once and he couldn't remember. Kami-sama must have something against him. That's too bad. Would you like a replay? She asked him as she started to rub herself against his hand. She moaned as a finger entered her. She saw Kushina was also softly moaning, meaning he was giving her the same treatment. Naruto was in heaven, that was all he could think as both the women moaned for more as he entered a second finger in. Yugito seemed to still be asleep as she picked up speed. "That's it Naruto-kun, faster, harder, so good, keep going, I'm going to come, I'm coming Naruto-kun." She started to mumble in her sleep, but as she said that last part she moaned loudly as her back arched, causing her eyes to snap open in orgasmic bliss. As she came down from her high, she saw it wasn't a dream and that she could still feel Naruto's hard member still in her womanhood. She noticed that both Sume and Kushina were moaning as they held tightly onto Naruto's arms. "Good morning Naruto-kun, enjoying yourself?" she asked, smirking down at the blonde. Naruto smiled stupidly up at her as he said, "I woke up with 3 angels in my bed. I died and gone to heaven, but I just wish I could remember last night." She frowned at that, but then she remembered that he had drank a lot due to so many Junin buying him rounds. He however said idly up to her, Did you have a pleasant dream, Yugito-chan? He punctuated pleasant with an upwards thrust, making her gasp in pleasure. She sat up, forcing his full length into her. Oh, it was a very good dream, Naruto-kun. Kushina couldn't take it anymore as she sat up, saying, "You had your fun, Yugito-chan, now it's my turn." Yugito pouted as she got off Naruto with a wet plop. His heart was pointing straight, coated with her juices. Naruto was surprised when Kushina took hold of his member before swallowing it whole, before bobbing her head a few times before taking it out of her mouth, moaning, "So good." She straddled him as she positioned herself over his manhood before lowering herself onto it. Naruto watched as the head strained to go in at first before the head slipped into her glistening tight hole, causing Kushina to moan aloud. Kushina lowered herself farther onto him, however before she could move a knock at the door rang through the apartment. Naruto looked disbelieving at the door. Kushina got off him as the females all quickly started to get on their clothes, and Naruto pulled the bed sheet around his waist as he walked towards the door. He cracked open the door slightly to see a masked Anbu standing there. This had better be good, Anbu-san, or I'm going start getting violent. The Anbu started to sweat as Naruto was releasing ki that would put the Hokage to shame. Sorry Naruto-san, but Hokage-sama has requested your presence immediately. Also please give this scroll to Inuzuka-sama. The Anbu handed him a scroll before disappearing quickly. Naruto slammed the door shut, yelling, "God damn it. I swear Kami-sama must hate me." Who was at the door, Naruto-kun? Asked a fully dressed Kushina would walked out of the bathroom along with an equally dressed Sume and Yugito. Naruto's eyebrow twitched as this meant he missed his chance, sighing as he dropped the sheet, causing the three women to blush. Damn, Gigi wants to speak to me immediately. Here Sume, the Anbu told me to give you this. Naruto threw the scroll to Sume as he started to rummage through his drawers getting clothes. Kushina was slightly blushing as she said, "Naruto-kun, do you know where our underwear are? We can't seem to find them." Naruto turned to her. However, he noticed something hanging from his ceiling fan. "Look up." He grinned as the three women looked up and gasped, seeing their undergarments hanging from the ceiling fan. 3 pairs of lacy bras along with different kind of thongs hung limply. Yugito frowned before turning to a grinning Naruto with her own grin. "I think I'm going to leave them there, kind of marking my territory." Sume let out a bark-like laugh as she finished reading the scroll. "Yeah, mine too. It seems the council is having an emergency meeting." Kushina smiled at Naruto, also saying she would leave hers too. Sume left through the balcony heading towards the administration building for the meeting. Yugito left through the door saying something about some more sleep as she head towards her apartment a floor down. All that was left was a now halfway dressed Naruto along with Kushina. Kushina moved to Naruto, giving him a deep kiss. "I got to go check on my daughters, Naruto-kun, so I'll see you later, okay?" Naruto grinned at her. "Sure, Kushina-chan, have a good day." She nodded her head as she left the way Sume did. Naruto sighed as he finished getting his uniform on before shushing to the administration building. He was irritated that he was interrupted, but the old Hokage wouldn't make it urgent unless it was important. Barging through the office doors, Naruto said loudly, "This had better be good, Gigi, because I woke up this morning in bed with 3 hot women and I thought I finally earned some reward for completing the mission." Sarutobi giggled perversely before he coughed, motioning towards a tall white-haired man Naruto instantly recognized. "Naruto, this is Jiraiya, my student. Jiraiya, this is Naruto, commander of the Rangers. So you're the brat who has my spy network buzzing about. Don't look like much," Jiraiya said nonchalantly, trying to see if he could get a rise out of Naruto. Naruto's eyebrow twitched. "Gigi, maybe you don't understand. 3 beautiful women in my bed. I don't call meeting another old man important, so what's the real reason?" Sarutobi turned serious as he saw Naruto wasn't in the mood for games. "The council has called an emergency meeting. While I don't know what for, they have requested your presence, but that is not the only reason." Naruto sighed as he knew there was always another reason. He voiced his thoughts. "Okay, well, what do you need me to do?" Sarutobi stood as he handed Naruto a folder. "I want my other student to return to Konoha. She has dropped off the radar, so I want you to help Jiraiya locate her." Naruto opened the folder to see it was Senju Tsunade. He wasn't surprised as he already figured it out when he said his other student, Jiraiya seemed to speak up. My contacts say they saw her near Tanzaku-gai, if we her. Naruto waved him off as he clicked his radio. Hey Shuna, where is Senju Tsunade right now? This caused both men to freeze as they heard. Wander Team says she is in Atofika-gai. Do you need me to tell them to keep an eye on her, sir? Naruto closed the folder. Yes, don't let her know anything is going on. We're going to need to get her to return to the village. Understood, sir. Wander Team received their orders and are compiling. I'll have Blackhawk 1 prepped, Shuna stated as the radio went dead. Naruto turned back to the two men seriously. I can go by myself, Gigi, after the meeting. Is there anything else? Jiraiya was irritated that the boy dismissed him so easily. What makes you think you can convince her to return, and how can we trust your intel? Naruto narrowed his eyes at Jiraiya. You can trust my intel because my rangers are in Atofika-gai. They are there helping the mayor set up the festival, and as to how I would convince her to return, I'll ask nicely. If that doesn't work, I go to plan B. Sarutobi grinned as Jiraiya was being upshown by Naruto. However, he had to ask, plan B. Tranquilizers, now you ready to go deal with the council, Gigi? Naruto asked. Sarutobi nodded his head. However, as he stood he said, when you go, Naruto, I want you to take Jiraiya, as a familiar face may help in making her return, but let's go. Naruto sighed, knowing he couldn't get out of taking the Toad Sennin. Fine, Jiraiya, meet me at the base's gate on top of the Hokage monument. With that said, Naruto followed Sarutobi, leaving a grumbling Jiraiya behind him. As they walked towards the meeting room, Sarutobi asked, so who were the women, Naruto? Naruto sighed, knowing the old man was just interested in his life. They were always close, never hiding anything from each other since they agreed to the alliance. If you really must know, it was Sume, Kushina, and Yugito. As he said it, the Hokage tripped slightly as he looked at Naruto, who was slightly blushing. I can say I'm surprised. I hope you didn't wear them out too much. He opened the door to get his answer as he saw Sume sleeping on the table. He mock glared